Hey, what's going on, guys? I didn't know how to illustrate this because it was such a powerful and impactful conversation that I had with Tom Spooner from Warrior's Heart Foundation. Warrior's Heart is a clinic, essentially, that takes a holistic approach in helping those that are affected with trauma and also substance abuse. They often go hand in hand. A lot of people narrowly focus on one or the other, but forget that they complement each other in a bad way, a negative way. So I sat with Tom Spooner, a former special operations guy that I highly respect. I even went to his retirement while we were on active duty together. Sat with Austin and my buddy Omar, who's an Iraqi counterterrorism force guy. 4 men who have been to war, who have been affected with trauma. And all of this, not exactly how I'm going to share it with you, but how it was communicated was told to me by Tom Spooner. And I think it changed the structure and my understanding of how trauma works. So before Tom founded, in this case, he co-founded Warrior's Heart, he started studying different warrior cultures, Native American Indians, ancient Asian cultures, and he found some similarities of things that were done, routine, in men who often went out and fought for their tribes, for their groups. And so I'm going to demonstrate something for you in how this culture operated and worked together. So in warrior cultures, you had 2 warriors, one that would go out and be affected differently than the other, maybe even in the same battle. This red cup, it could represent blood, but I want it to represent trauma. And the top or the brim of this represents your capacity to deal or hold that trauma. So if we went to war together and we were both affected by trauma, we had different ways in which we communicated this trauma. So a warrior to a warrior could converse and let all that trauma out and speak honestly and openly. And so he'd communicate and dump a little bit of his into his friend's cup, a fellow warrior's cup. But we only had so much capacity to deal with this. So we shared this burden on each other, back and forth. But the difference between that society and culture and Native American culture and other ancient warrior cultures was we didn't have to share in that burden alone. What we had, specifically for Native Americans, is fireside chats. It's a corny way of saying it. But we used to break bread together. We used to talk about things by fires together. And what we had that was different was we had community. And these could be men, women, and children of the same tribe that would share in those burdens. So we would tell a story by the fire and let out all of our trauma amongst each other and reduce the weight of how much trauma that we had to share amongst each of the warriors. So the tribe, the community shared in that burden. But now, what we're missing is community. So now what happens is a warrior comes back from war and he's full of burden. And then these warriors together share in each other's burdens, one into another. The problem is we don't have the capacity. So what happens is we often overflow our burdens onto each other. And then we don't have the community to depend on to allow that burden to be shared amongst each other. One of the things that I didn't even realize I was doing in communicating some of my experiences in war, for the first time that I ever said them, they were difficult to say. And I'll use an example of how Tom Spooner communicated it, where the words wanted to come out of his mouth, but they couldn't because he was in fear of being judged. And so when he had the courage to do it, it all came out at once. But when it was done, everybody there who had heard the story suffered in some way. In fact, Tom said that he was afraid of what these men and women were going to say or think about him after the fact. And he had one case and instance where a man came back and said, "I'm really pissed off at you." And he was scared at what he was going to say next. But what he said next was, "I was scared because I was angry because the things that you were saying were changing me." And he couldn't say it out loud and communicate it to others without being in tears. And that's how it works. When you hold the burden of trauma, I'm not just talking about war, but I mean in life in general, all of that manifests itself in some way. Physically, mentally, it takes a hold of you. It changes you. Our problem in our society, even in warrior cultures, is we don't have that community. So when I tell the story of me engaging a young man who is a child, who picked up a gun, who ran into a blocking position, and I had no choice, I'm not telling you that to impress. I'm not telling you that to make you think differently of me. I'm telling you that because I want to share in that burden and make you understand the hardships of war. And then you live with that. It's the same thing that transpires when somebody tells you something that happened tragic to them. You live with that. That's the missing component of community. That's one of the reasons I'm passionate about it. It's also one of the reasons why I will forever support Warriors Heart Foundation. This isn't a commercial. This isn't a plug. This is just me demonstrating something to you that has changed something in me. And I hope you pay attention to it. Thanks, guys.